They told us the universe was empty, that humanity was alone. But they were wrong. One man went further than anyone before him, and what he found changed everything. This is the story of Elias Voss, the first human in space, and a legend the galaxy will never forget. Before we dive into this mind-blowing journey, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this. Do you believe humanity is truly alone in the universe? Or is there something waiting out there? Now, sit back, relax, and let's journey beyond the stars. The world demanded answers, but Elias Voss didn't speak. He stood before the cameras, before the scientists, before the leaders of Earth. Yet he said nothing. The man who had traveled farther than any human in history. The man who had vanished for 50 years but hadn't aged a day. The man whose ship bore scars from battles that had never happened. He simply looked at them with tired eyes and whispered, "You weren't supposed to find me." A mission that was never meant to succeed. 50 years ago, the world had celebrated his launch. The Dauntless, humanity's first attempt at interstellar travel, was supposed to be a simple test. One jump outside the solar system, one jump back. It was supposed to take seconds, but something went wrong. The moment the ship's engines engaged, Voss felt a pull, a force stronger than gravity, stronger than anything he'd ever known. And then, silence. No Earth, no stars he recognized, just emptiness. He checked his systems. Everything was offline, except for one warning. A single red light flashing on his console. You are not alone. First contact. He wasn't afraid. Not at first. He had trained for this. First contact with alien life. This was the dream. The Dauntless exterior cameras flickered back online, and he saw them. Ships. Massive, ancient, and unlike anything humanity had imagined. They surrounded him like predators circling prey. And then, the voice. Not in his ears. Not through radio waves. Inside his head. A voice that wasn't a voice. A message that wasn't words. It was understanding. You should not be here. The hidden truth. Voss was taken. Not in the way humans understood abduction. No bright lights, no restraints. One moment he was on his ship, the next, he was somewhere else. A vast chamber, a council of beings beyond comprehension. Their bodies shifted like liquid metal, their forms flickering between past and future, their eyes burning with knowledge no human mind could grasp. And for the first time in his life, Elias Voss felt small. These beings, whoever they were, had been watching humanity. They had watched for thousands of years. They had seen Egypt rise. They had seen Rome burn. They had seen humanity crawl toward the stars. And they had let it happen, because they never believed we would get this far. Until now. Until him. Until a single human had crossed the threshold into a part of the galaxy where no human was meant to go. And that changed everything. The choice. You are not the first, they told him. That was what terrified him most. Humanity had not been the first species to reach the stars. There had been others. Worlds that had thrived, advanced, conquered the void. And then, they had been erased. The Council, these godlike beings, had wiped them away. Because they had been too dangerous. Because they had become a threat. Because the galaxy was meant to remain in balance. And now, humanity had disrupted that balance. Elias Voss should not have survived. The moment he had entered their domain, he should have been destroyed. But he hadn't. And now, the Council had a decision to make. Erase humanity? Or let it continue? For the first time in their long existence, they hesitated. Because there was something different about him. Something they hadn't seen before. He fought back. The escape. Voss never spoke about how he escaped. He never explained how he survived. All anyone knew was that he came back. And when he did, he brought something with him. Something hidden in the ship's systems, buried deep where no one could find it. A message. A warning. A secret so terrifying that it made him look at the stars with fear. He had learned the truth about the galaxy. And he knew that, one day, they would come back. Because humans weren't supposed to reach the stars. But now that they had, the galaxy would never be the same. The mission that changed everything. The world demanded answers. But Elias Voss didn't speak. He stood before the cameras, before the scientists, before the leaders of Earth. Yet he said nothing. The man who had traveled farther than any human in history. The man who had vanished for 50 years but hadn't aged a day. The man whose ship bore scars from battles that had never happened. He simply looked at them with tired eyes and whispered, "You weren't supposed to find me." A mission that was never meant to succeed. 50 years ago, the world had celebrated his launch. The Dauntless, humanity's first attempt at interstellar travel, was supposed to be a simple test. One jump outside the solar system, one jump back. It was supposed to take seconds. But something went wrong. The moment the ship's engines engaged, Voss felt a pull, a force stronger than gravity, stronger than anything he'd ever known. And then silence. No Earth. No stars he recognized. Just emptiness. He checked his systems. Everything was offline, except for one warning. A single red light flashing on his console. You are not alone. First contact. He wasn't afraid. Not at first. He had trained for this. First contact with alien life. This was the dream. The Dauntless exterior cameras flickered back online, and he saw them. Ships. Massive, ancient, and unlike anything humanity had imagined. They surrounded him like predators circling prey. And then, the voice. Not in his ears. Not through radio waves. Inside his head. A voice that wasn't a voice. A message that wasn't words. It was understanding. You should not be here. The hidden truth. Voss was taken. Not in the way humans understood abduction. No bright lights, no restraints. One moment he was on a ship. The next, he was somewhere else. A vast chamber. A council of beings beyond comprehension. Their bodies shifted like liquid metal. Their forms flickering between past and future. Their eyes burning with knowledge no human mind could grasp. And for the first time in his life, Elias Voss felt small. These beings, whoever they were, had been watching humanity. They had watched for thousands of years. They had seen Egypt rise. They had seen Rome burn. They had seen humanity crawl toward the stars. And they had let it happen, because they never believed we would get this far. Until now. Until him. Until a single human had crossed the threshold into a part of the galaxy where no human was meant to go. And that changed everything. The choice. You are not the first, they told him. That was what terrified him most. Humanity had not been the first species to reach the stars. There had been others. Worlds that had thrived, advanced, conquered the void. And then, they had been erased. The Council, these godlike beings, had wiped them away. Because they had been too dangerous. Because they had become a threat. Because the galaxy was meant to remain in balance. And now, humanity had disrupted that balance. Elias Voss should not have survived. The moment he had entered their domain, he should have been destroyed. But he hadn't. And now, the Council had a decision to make. Erase humanity? Or let it continue? For the first time in their long existence, they hesitated. Because there was something different about him. Something they hadn't seen before. He fought back. He escaped. Voss never spoke about how he escaped. He never explained how he survived. All anyone knew was that he came back. And when he did, he brought something with him. Something hidden in the ship's systems, buried deep where no one could find it. A message. A warning. A secret so terrifying that it made him look at the stars with fear. He had learned the truth about the galaxy. And he knew that one day they would come back. Because humans weren't supposed to reach the stars. But now that they had, the galaxy would never be the same. Elias Voss was alone. At least, that's what he had thought. When the Dauntless had vanished from the solar system, he had believed, just for a moment, that maybe the mission had worked. That he had successfully traveled beyond the boundaries of human exploration. But he had not arrived in empty space. He had arrived in a trap that had been waiting for centuries. A prison without bars. The alien ships surrounded him immediately. There was no warning, no chance to turn back. The Dauntless systems were frozen, its engines locked. Every screen flickered with unknown symbols, strange data crawling across his monitors like living code. Then darkness. When he woke, he was somewhere else. A place without walls, without gravity. A void where the very air felt wrong. He wasn't restrained. He wasn't in a cell. But he knew he was a prisoner. And something was watching him. The beings that ruled the galaxy. He saw them. The Council of the Ancients. Not a government. Not an empire. Something far worse. They were the architects of control. The silent rulers of the galaxy. For billions of years, they had watched. They had manipulated. They had chosen which civilizations would rise and which would disappear. They were the reason the galaxy was so quiet. The reason Earth had never been contacted by aliens. Because every species that reached the stars had been erased. Except humanity. Except him. The conversation that should never have happened. They spoke without words. They spoke in thoughts, in emotions, in raw understanding. And they told him the truth. You are an anomaly. You were not meant to leave your world. You are the first of your kind to reach this place. And we do not know what to do with you. Voss had trained for diplomacy. He had trained for first contact. But he was speaking with beings so old that their very existence felt impossible. And they were afraid of him. Because he had done something no other species had ever done. He had survived. The unforgivable crime. They told him about the others. The civilizations that had come before. Empires that had flourished, brilliant, powerful, full of ambition. And then one by one, they had been erased. Because the galaxy was not meant to be shared. Because too much growth led to chaos. Because order had to be maintained. Humanity had been allowed to grow on Earth only because they had been small. Because they had been insignificant. But now, they had stepped too far. And Elias Voss had broken the one rule that could not be broken. He had reached the stars. He had left the cage. And now, they had to decide what to do with him. The choice. He was given two options. The first, die. To erase his existence. To wipe humanity's mistake from history before it could spread. To let Earth live a few more centuries in ignorance before they were inevitably culled. Or the second, forget. To be sent back to Earth. To never speak of what he had seen. To let humanity believe it was alone. To let Earth live in peaceful ignorance, never knowing how close it had come to annihilation. He was supposed to choose. But Elias Voss? He refused. Because he knew something they didn't. Something they had never accounted for. Something that would change the galaxy forever. The power of one man. The Council had ruled for eons. They had seen countless civilizations rise and fall. They had eliminated entire species without resistance. But they had never encountered someone like Elias Voss. A human. A species that had fought wars over ideas. That had bled for the sake of freedom. That had survived against impossible odds. Not because they were the strongest, not because they were the smartest, but because they refused to accept defeat. And so, for the first time in their long history, the Council hesitated. For the first time, they saw something they could not predict. And that was their mistake. Because Elias Voss did not wait for their decision. He made his own. The escape. The Dauntless was supposed to be dead. Its engines were disabled. Its systems were corrupted. But Elias Voss had not spent his life training to be an astronaut without learning how to fight. Somehow he broke free. Somehow he reached his ship. And somehow he escaped. The Council did not chase him. Not immediately. Because they were still trying to understand what had happened. Because in all their long existence, they had never lost control. Until now. Until one human defied them. Until one human survived. And now, the galaxy had changed forever. A warning left behind. Voss never told anyone how he escaped. He never explained how he had outmaneuvered beings that had ruled for eons. All anyone knew was that when he returned to Earth, his ship held a hidden message. A signal. A single line of data buried deep within the Dauntless computers. A transmission that no one could decode. No one except him. And when he read it, his face went pale. Because he knew what it meant. It was not a farewell. It was not an apology. It was a promise. We are watching. We are waiting. And we will return. Elias Voss had broken their rules. He had defied their judgment. He had escaped. But he had not won. Because the war for humanity's survival had only just begun. The man who became a legend. Elias Voss had escaped. But he had not won. As the Dauntless tore through space, its engines screaming, its hull rattling from the stress, he knew he had only done one thing. Delayed the inevitable. Because the beings who had ruled the galaxy for eons The ones who had erased entire civilizations without hesitation would not simply let him go. They would come. And this time, they would not hesitate. A silent return. Voss should have been a hero. The first human to leave the solar system. The first to make contact with an intelligent alien race. The first to survive an encounter with something beyond human comprehension. Instead, he was a ghost. When the Dauntless reappeared on the edges of the solar system, Earth did not rejoice. It panicked. His ship was not the same as when it had left. The hull was scarred with alien weapons. Its energy readings were inexplicable. Its technology had changed. And Voss had not aged a day. To the world, he had been gone for 50 years. To him, it had been weeks. The warning that no one wanted to hear. The governments of Earth rushed to question him. Where had he gone? What had he seen? Why hadn't he aged? But he refused to answer, because the truth was too dangerous. The Council, the beings who ruled the galaxy, would return. And when they did, humanity would be erased. Unless they fought back. Unless they prepared. Unless they became something more. But Earth's leaders did not listen. They did not believe. There is no proof. You have no evidence. You are one man against the history of the universe. And so, Elias Voss did what he had always done. He acted alone. The mission no one knew about. Voss disappeared from the public eye. He left the world stage. He let the governments believe what they wanted to believe. But behind the scenes, he was preparing. He reached out to the few who believed him. Scientists, engineers, thinkers who saw the truth behind his words. They worked in secret, hidden from the world, building what humanity had never dreamed of before. A weapon, not one of destruction, but one of survival. Because when the Council returned, humanity would not run. They would fight. The ripples in the galaxy. But Voss had underestimated one thing. His survival had not gone unnoticed. Because the galaxy was not empty. There were others. Other civilizations that had survived in the shadows. Worlds that had been spared by the Council. Allowed to exist in fear and submission. They had seen what had happened. They had seen the Dauntless vanish into the void. And they had seen it return. And for the first time in thousands of years, they felt something they had not dared to feel. Hope. Because if one man, a human, could defy the gods of the galaxy, maybe they could, too. The first message. Voss was not expecting the transmission. It came through a private, encrypted frequency, one he hadn't even known existed. A voice. Not human, but clear. We know what you have done. We know who you have angered. And we want to help. Voss had spent his life believing that humanity was alone. But he had been wrong. The galaxy was full of prisoners, and they were ready to break free. The spark of revolution. Voss met them in secret. Leaders of hidden worlds. Outcasts. Survivors of civilizations the Council had thought were erased. They had been waiting for something, someone, to give them a reason to fight back. And Voss was that reason. He was not a soldier. He was not a warlord. He was one man, but he had done the impossible. He had escaped. And now, the galaxy knew it could be done. The war that should never have happened. The Council had ruled for millennia without challenge. But now, their power was crumbling. Worlds that had once feared them were rising. Whispers of rebellion spread like wildfire. And at the center of it all, a single human. A man who had been forgotten by history. A man who had returned to Earth, only to find a greater purpose beyond it. Elias Voss was no longer just a name. He was a legend. And soon, the Council would realize, legends do not die easily. The war that shouldn't have happened. The Council had ruled for millennia without opposition. Their control was absolute. Every species that had dared to reach beyond its own world had been silenced before it could become a threat. That was the way the galaxy had always been. And that was the way it was meant to stay. But now something had changed. Because a single human had done the impossible. He had survived, and his survival had set the galaxy on fire. The first strike. The Council had waited. They had watched. They had assumed the ripples of rebellion would fade. They believed that fear would return, that the galaxy would fall back into submission. They were wrong. The first attack came on a cold, barren world, a planet that had once been home to a species erased from history. A Dominion outpost, one of the Council's watching eyes. a place where entire civilizations had vanished without a trace. And then, one day, it was gone, destroyed, not by accident, not by nature, but by force. And the symbol carved into the ruined walls? A mark that no one had ever seen before. A symbol of a man who should have never returned. The mark of Elias Voss. The unthinkable happens. For the first time in their long history, the Council did something they had never done before. They hesitated. This was not a rebellion of one world. This was not an uprising of one species. It was all of them. Dozens of civilizations, some believed to be long extinct, had risen in defiance. And at the center of it all, the one man they had failed to erase. Elias Voss was no longer just a survivor. He was no longer just a human. He was a symbol, a force that had turned their once quiet empire into a battleground. And the Council had to respond. The trap is set. The Council's forces were vast, ancient, powerful beyond comprehension. They had weapons that could erase a planet in seconds, armadas that stretched across entire solar systems. So they made a decision. If the rebellion wanted war, they would get it. And Elias Voss? He would be the first to fall. They sent a transmission, broadcasted across every world that had dared to defy them. A challenge, a warning, one final chance for surrender. And when Elias Voss heard it, he did not run. He did not hide. He did not call for retreat. He simply said 3 words. Then come try. The sky burns. The battle that followed would become legend. Not just for humans, not just for the rebellion, but for every species that had ever lived under the shadow of the Council's rule. It would be remembered forever, because it was the first time in history that the Council had ever lost. The war began at the edge of an abandoned system, a dead sector of space where no life had ever taken root. It was supposed to be an easy victory for the Council. They brought everything, a fleet so massive that it blocked out the stars. And yet, they were not prepared, because the rebels had something the Council had never encountered before. They had Elias Voss, the battle of the forgotten stars. Voss did not fight like an admiral. He did not fight like a conqueror. He fought like a man with nothing left to lose. He did what the Council never expected. He turned their own tactics against them. For thousands of years, the Council had operated in secrecy, striking from the dark, erasing civilizations before they could fight back. And now, the rebels had learned. They did not engage the Council in open combat. They did not fight for territory or for power. They fought to break the chains. They hit fast, silent, merciless. They destroyed command ships before orders could be given. They used technology stolen from the Council's own vaults. And before the Council could react, their once invincible fleet was falling apart. The death of an empire. It took 3 days. 3 days for an empire that had lasted millions of years to begin its collapse. Entire armadas were lost. Planets that had once trembled in fear now rose in defiance. And the Council? They ran. For the first time in history, they were the ones retreating. And Elias Voss? He did not celebrate. He did not claim victory, because he knew something that no one else did. The war was not over. Not yet. The Council's final act. The Council was desperate. They had lost too much. Their fleets were scattered. Their empire was dying. But they still had one last weapon, and they would use it, not to win, but to erase the war itself. If they could not rule the galaxy, they would burn it. They activated the Exile Protocol, a final contingency, a way to reset history. And Elias Voss was the only one who knew how to stop it. The choice that changed everything. Voss had been given a choice once before. The choice to accept humanity's place in the universe. To stay silent. To pretend none of this had ever happened. He had refused. And now, he was given a new choice. Stop the Council's final weapon. Or let the galaxy fall into chaos. He did not hesitate. Because Elias Voss was never meant to be a soldier. He was never meant to lead a war. He was meant to be the first human to leave the solar system, the first to defy the gods of the galaxy, the first to show the universe that humans were not afraid. So he did what he had always done. He acted. And the Council? They never saw it coming. The final revelation, and the galaxy remembers. The war had ended. The galaxy had changed forever. The Council, The beings who had once erased entire civilizations without hesitation were gone. But Elias Voss was not celebrating, because he knew the truth. The war had been won, but the real battle was just beginning. The final weapon. The Council had been ancient. Their technology was beyond human understanding. And before they fell, they had activated their final contingency. The Exile Protocol, a system designed not to defeat their enemies, but to erase the war itself. A weapon that would rewrite the very fabric of history. If they could not rule the galaxy, they would make sure no one else could. The race against time. Voss had learned of the protocol just in time. It was buried deep within the Council's archives, hidden beneath layers of encryption that had taken him months to decode. And when he finally understood what it was, he realized the terrifying truth. The Exile Protocol wasn't a bomb. It wasn't a weapon of destruction. It was something far worse. A way to reset history. To erase every trace of the rebellion. To wipe out every species that had dared to rise. To turn the galaxy back into what it had been before. A place ruled by fear and silence. And Elias Voss was the only one who could stop it. The last stand. The core of the Exile Protocol was hidden on a dead planet. A place forgotten even by the Council's records. A world with no name. No history. A place that existed only to end everything. Voss gathered what forces he could. The rebellion was over. The war was won. But this was something else. This was a battle for the future. A battle like no other. The Exile Protocol had already begun. The sky was breaking apart. Time itself was starting to unravel. Planets vanished as if they had never existed. Entire fleets were turning to dust. And at the center of it all, a machine so vast, so alien, that even Voss couldn't fully understand it. The last creation of the Council, a weapon built to unmake reality itself. And he had one chance to destroy it, the choice that defined a legend. Voss fought his way to the core. The battle outside raged on. Ships were being torn apart by forces no one could comprehend. The very laws of physics were collapsing. And then he reached it, the heart of the machine. The control panel was in front of him. A single choice, a single command. But then he saw the second option. The machine could be destroyed, or it could be rewritten. The Council had built it to erase history. But what if it could change it instead? What if the galaxy didn't have to be rebuilt from the ruins of war? What if, instead, it could be reset with a future worth living? A leap into the unknown. Voss did what he always did. He acted. He reprogrammed the Exile Protocol, not to erase history, but to rewrite it, to remove the fear, to undo the damage the Council had done for millions of years, to give a galaxy a fresh start. The machine activated, and everything changed. The new beginning. No one knows what happened next. One moment, the galaxy was on the brink of annihilation. The next, it was whole again. The war was over. The damage was undone. The stars burned brighter than ever. And Elias Voss? He was gone. No wreckage. No signal. Not even a trace of the Dauntless. Only a single transmission, left behind in the rebellion's archives. His final words. The message that would be remembered forever. We are not bound by fate. We're not chained by history. We choose who we become. And the future belongs to those brave enough to make it. This is not the end. This is the beginning. A legacy that will never die. Elias Voss became more than a man. He became a legend. His name was whispered on every world. His story was told across 1,000 civilizations. Because he had been the first human to leave the solar system. The first to defy the gods of the galaxy. The first to show the universe what humanity was capable of. And though he was gone, his legacy would never fade. Because the galaxy would never forget him. The search for Elias Voss. Elias Voss was gone, but his presence lingered across the stars. His name became more than history. It became a myth. A legend spoken in whispers across worlds that had once lived in fear. For generations, people asked the same question. Where did he go? Some believed he had died in the final battle, consumed by the Exile Protocol's power. Others claimed he had ascended, becoming something beyond human. But there were a few, very few, who believed something different. that Elias Voss was still out there, somewhere, watching, waiting. The first sightings. It started as rumors. A passing merchant ship in the Outer Rim reported an unregistered vessel moving through deep space. A lost research probe picked up a strange signal, encoded in a long-dead human language. Then came the stories. A lone figure seen walking among the ruins of forgotten worlds. A shadow standing on the bridge of an abandoned starship, looking out at the stars. And always a message left behind. 3 words. Not yet time. The hunt for a ghost. For decades, governments, explorers, and mercenaries searched for Elias Voss. Some wanted him as a symbol. Some wanted him as a weapon. And others? They feared what he had become. Because what if he hadn't disappeared? What if he was still fighting? What if, somewhere out there, he was preparing for something worse? The final transmission. Then, one day, a deep space listening post picked up a distress signal. Weak. Scrambled. Almost erased by time. It took weeks to decode. And when they did, the galaxy stood still. Because the message was his voice. Elias Voss, speaking from somewhere beyond the known universe. A final warning. They were not the only ones. Something else is coming. Be ready. And then, silence. No one knew what he meant. No one knew where he had gone. But one thing was certain. The story of Elias Voss was not over. It was just the beginning.